Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday, May the 21st, 2020. It is currently 3:48 p.m. Central Time. And well, I hope you are ready for what I think will be an absolutely fascinating discussion. Probably will create some controversy, but I think it's a conversation we need to have. All right. So welcome, everyone. We've got a lot to do, so we're going to jump right in. And I hope that you will give this, as much attention as you can. I know some of you listen when you're driving or when you're at work or when you're doing a number of other things, but I think this is really important. And to lay really the foundation for what is coming, I want to just kind of remind you of a topic that I've been talking about a lot, really since the COVID-19 situation took hold and everything started being shut down and churches started being shut down and churches were live streaming and not having, typical worship services. When all of this started, I started bringing up a lot of questions about what is the church going to look like, a year from now? How is the whole COVID-19 situation going to impact the church? And that really sparked other conversations about you and I as Christians trying to maintain a spiritual mindset, trying to maintain a spiritual perspective, not allowing our mindset to be hijacked by political perspective or other ideological issues that could cloud us. I've talked a lot about conspiratorial thinking coming into the church, but all of this has been really focused on where is the church headed. I did a mini series on a new discipleship idea of we've been doing discipleship wrong in the church for 2,000 years. We've done it all wrong. We need to do it differently because you need to be discipled by Jesus. You don't need to be discipled by anyone else. And so how do we do that? We talked about that. Then we spent a lot of time starting last Sunday dealing with a new way of doing church. A new way of doing church and this new idea of decentralizing churches, and you don't have really a centralized teaching pastor, and that the people just bring the word, and you basically destroy church as we know it, and we recreate something else. And they were talking about this possibly being able to move forward in light of everything that's happened with the COVID-19 situation, where, in a sense, church has been decentralized. People are not meeting in a building. People are at home. And so all of these ideas are all kind of coming together, all right? All coming together like, okay, where are we headed? Where are we headed? What is the church going to look like? And then, of course, we have lots of reports that a whole lot of churches are not going to survive this economically. Churches are going to have to start laying off staff. They're going to start closing their doors. They may have to start selling their buildings, and that many churches will not make it. And that raises, again, lots of questions. What is the church, and I use that in a general way, what is the church going to look like at large when it's all said and done, when all of this, when the dust settles? What are we going to see? What are we witnessing the beginning of a transformation of the church, and not into something biblical, but into something that's not biblical? All right. So I've really been thinking about that. I've tried to generate conversations about that. I don't know if anyone's really caught on to what I've been trying to do. And then I took some time there to really talk about understanding and having the eyes to see spiritually. And then I did the 21 paradoxes. I haven't finished those, to try to say we've got to learn to think biblically. Like if you put all the pieces together, you can start seeing a puzzle form, right? And I'm really trying to get a point across, and hopefully people are seeing what I'm trying to do. And to add to that discussion, well, is going to be today's conversation, all right? And it could turn out to be a lengthy one. We may have to do this in two parts. We will see. But I hope you will be patient and let me develop this, because this goes right along with things that I have been saying, all right? It all started when I saw a news article earlier today with this headline: Is QAnon the newest American religion? Is QAnon the newest American religion? Now, if you don't know what QAnon is, first let me spell it out. It is capital Q, capital A, lowercase n-o-n. QAnon, QA, capital Q, capital A, lowercase N-O-N. QAnon. Is QAnon the newest American religion? Now, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay. I know about QAnon. I've got some familiarity with it. I've read enough about it. I think most people are probably familiar with QAnon. Is it the newest American religion? Okay. Is this going to be a religion that is challenging and, competition, quote unquote, for the Christian church? Is it something that's going to be operating outside of the Christian church, a new religion that Christianity is going to have to address and say, here's another religion? Or is it going to be something that infiltrates Christianity, comes inside of Christianity and begins to change Christianity? Now, that's where I always get more concerned, right? A new religion that's operating outside of Christianity, doesn't claim to be Christian, is completely separate from Christian. That's easier to deal with, right? They're making up, they're not trying to pretend to be Christians. They're not claiming to be Christians. They're not using Christian vocabulary. They're not using the Bible. Okay, there's another religion. But if it comes inside the church, it tries to claim to be Christian. It tries to use the Bible. That's when you're like, whoa, wait a minute, we need to pay attention. Well, the cover of the article has an image that's supposed to be Jesus wearing a shirt that says, I am Q. And I'm like, okay, that's the article is giving me an indication that this is going to be connected with Christianity. And then I started reading the article. Let me just read some of this. And this was published today, so I know the QAnon situation has been around for a while. Okay, I understand that, but this article is brand new, so I'm not behind in that case. All right, but here's what it says: QAnon adherents, insofar as I have seen photos of them at President Trump's campaign rallies, or attached to reports on the conspiracy theory they profess, are remarkable mainly for how normal they appear. They look like Midwestern moms or the guy in your neighborhood who lets everyone borrow his pickup. All right, so in other words, the adherents to this quote-unquote religion, well, they show up at Trump rallies. And if you've seen pictures of Trump rallies, you'll see someone holding up a picture or something saying, we are Q, or just holding up the letter Q, or, some things along that line. I think I have a photograph for the cover of this podcast episode from a Trump rally, all right? So I've seen that. I don't know if everyone knows what's going on there. But in other words, these people are just going to look like your normal average person. All right. And if they're at Trump rallies, they're probably going to be conservative politically. They're going to be, quote unquote, right wing politically. All right. That's kind of give you an idea. All right. So is this a political thing? If it's a political thing, they just look like normal people, then this is political ideology, which should never be inside the church. Political ideology, I've said over and over and over, the church is not to be political. We are to be biblical. There's a difference there. We are to think biblically. We are to think spiritually. We are not to be hijacked by political ideology. And this is a reason you want to be careful. But okay, so that's given me some idea. Let me jump down here. All right. And this is what I thought was interesting. All right. They begin in this article discussing someone who's been studying the QAnon movement, been discussing it, talking about it. And then they also refer to the in-depth report on QAnon in the Atlantic's June issue, closes with the suggestion that QAnon, now listen very carefully here. So an in-depth report on QAnon in the Atlantic's June issue, and I don't know if that's already out, it may already be out, but it closes with the suggestion, now listen carefully, that QAnon could become the latest in a series of thriving religious movements indigenous to America. All right, now so this is something that we need to pay attention to. This could become the latest of a thriving religious movement that's indigenous to America. In other words, it's American. So this is for all those who live in America, for all churches in America, for all Christians. This is a religious movement it's truly American, and it could be thriving. whoa, we need to pay. Again, is it going to be outside the church or inside the church? Is it going to just be connected to politics, connected to Trump rallies, connected to quote unquote right-wing conservative individuals? What is going on? Well, someone at Concordia University, all right, who's a doctrinal student, he began to do some work on this, right? And he shows the church of QAnon, right? The church of QAnon already exists, and it seems poised to spread. Now, wait a minute. So now we have the church of QAnon. Now, not just what I understand the conspiracy theory connected with QAnon. I understand that, but wait, there's the church of QAnon? Now, so you're telling me somehow we get a conspiracy theory that's promoted by QAnon. I in some cases, I just kind of associate the two as the same. QAnon is the conspiracy theory, but okay, I may not. We'll spend some time trying to unpack all of this. I'm just trying to set this up. But what I'm trying to show you is the more I started reading, the more I'm like, wait a minute, a church, again, a religious movement. It's American. It could be thriving. The church of QAnon already exists. Again, is this going to be outside with no connection to Christianity, or is it really something that's going to form from within the church and begin to take over churches? That to me is always the more dangerous, is when it happens within Christianity. And if you think about how many Trump supporters are professed Christians, we've got something going on here that I thought we really need to pay attention to. But let me read a little bit further here, right? Because the more I started reading here, the more I started thinking, wait, I think we need to talk about this, all right? Now, this doctrinal student, are you ready for this? Attended an online QAnon church. So there's an online QAnon church. Now, listen, this is his report. A 2-hour Sunday service, 2-hour Sunday services, all right, with several hundred attendees. And here's what happened. It consisted of prayer, communion, and interpretation of the Bible in light of what they call Q drops, and vice versa. All right. So I guess you're interpreting the Bible in light of Q drops, and then Q drops are being interpreted in light of the Bible. All right. But the bottom line is, please understand, so you have Sunday services with hundreds of attendees. You have prayer, you have communion, and you have the Bible. Right. Now I want you to listen. I want you to listen to me carefully. That connects it with Christianity. We got prayer, we got communion, and we've got the Bible. Now, you may not know what a Q drop is, but that's okay. We'll get to that here in a minute as we try to unpack all of this. What I'm trying to demonstrate is this QAnon phenomenon, whatever this is, it seems to be, it's moving in a religious direction, and it's a religious direction that's clearly going to be associated with Christianity, prayer, communion, and the Bible. All right, that means pay attention. Pay attention. Now, again, when this kind of things happen, this is how the church, again, and when I say again, I keep saying again because it's based off all these things I've been talking about now, it feels like for months. It feels like for a good portion of 2020, some of these same issues keep coming up and we're talking about different topics, but they all connect. They're all interconnected. If the church, well, first it's online. And there's already this discussion of decentralizing everything. And as we continue to move more and more, the church is going to become more and more digital, more and more electronic. There's going to be people who already reject the quote unquote traditional church format, think it's already a waste of time, and why go? And I think a lot more people may even think that after this whole situation with the church being shut down. But whether they go to a church or not go to a church, if they're also attending a QAnon church via the internet, they're going to be bringing those ideals inside the church. They'll be bringing those ideals, listen, wait for it, into small groups, because listen to what was promoted at this church service. Are you ready? This QAnon church service. Listen, Okay, it's spawning, they talk about it spawning a new religion, maybe even the first of a new breed of religious organization in America. So they're talking about how much it's spreading. But listen to what happened in the church. The leader's goal, here was the leader's goal in this 2-hour church service, was to train congregants, they're called congregants, to form their own home congregations in the future and grow the movement. So they're going to form home congregations. You're going to have the digital service kind of thing going on. You're going to have home congregations to spread the movement. Now, again, I don't know if this is going to catch on. I do not know. But once you start, you got the house church movement. You've got a lot of different movements out there right now trying to reshape Christianity. I don't know if they're going to try to call themselves Christians, if they're going to clearly identify we're the church of QAnon. But if the QAnon church becomes connected with Christianity, there are going to be many Christians who become influenced by it, and they bring that influence into the church, into the Sunday school class, into the small group. And these are the kinds of things that start. They are seemingly insignificant when you go to other pastors and say, hey, are you going to deal with the QAnon movement? They look at you going, I'm not going to waste my time with that. I don't even know what you're talking about. We worry about more important issues. And then the next thing you know, once let's say it does catch on, then all of a sudden it's like, we need to hold a conference and sell DVDs to address it. It's like, well, why didn't you address it way back at the beginning and you ignored it? And why are you going to hold a conference and charge people $300 now to be equipped against it? Yeah, we always look for a way to turn it into a money-making proposition, but that's a whole different podcast. So this article got me thinking, okay, QAnon, a new religious movement, it could be thriving. They're trying to get their congregants to start home congregations to spread the movement. I'm like, what is going on? So before I could try to figure out what is going on, and before I could try to unpack this whole article here, and I do want to read through the whole article, we have to step back and try to get at least make sure we're all on the same page. What is QAnon? What does it teach? How does it work? What's the background to it? So what I did is I found a discussion about this from PBS News. And I thought, well, we'll at least listen to what they have to say. We will question, we will challenge, I will analyze, and we'll have to really think about this. Now, you're going to have to turn up the volume because for some reason their volume is low. And I'll try to be mindful of that when I break in. I always hate the fluctuation, but please remember, I don't have some producer sitting behind a glass somewhere helping me control all of this. It's just me, myself, and I in an empty building in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Okay, all right. You can't get much more. It's always that, do you want the mainstream band or the indie band? Well, I'm the indie band, okay? I got no record deal. I have no big studio, and I'm doing this in a building by myself, all right? So you've got to sometimes deal with the lack of quality, and I apologize for that, okay? But I'm going to try to give you some information that hopefully maybe you're aware of this. Maybe it won't be anything new. Maybe this is all brand new to you. But hey, if there's something developing, then you need someone, figuratively speaking, standing on the wall going, hey guys, there's something developing over there. I think it's called QAnon. They're claiming it could be a new religious movement. And it seems like it's associated with Christianity. I think we need to pay attention. I think we need to pay attention. Now, please remember, the QAnon phenomenon's been around for a while. So it's not brand new. So even I'm late to the party addressing it, okay? Even I'm late to the party addressing it. But when it starts taking on a religious shape, and you already have the Church of QAnon, and they're using the Bible and communion, okay, whoa. Now this is sliding over into my world. I just knew it more as a conspiracy theory, but I've been talking. Wow. It seems like for 15 years, trying to warn Christians not to get caught up in the whole conspiratorial mindset. And the conspiracies constantly infiltrate the minds of Christians. I cannot figure that out. Some people argue, and I know this offends some Christians, the reason Christians are so vulnerable to conspiracy theories is because Christians at large are uneducated. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's true. I know you do find a lot of Christians who do not have advanced degrees. And I'm not saying that an advanced degree protects you from conspiratorial thinking. But I think sometimes Christians buy into ideas and theories and you're like, where did you get that nonsense? And they'll tell you they got it from YouTube. They got it from the internet. And it's like sometimes I don't know if Christians have developed the skills in how to process information, how to question information. I've said a million times, I'm all for listening to conspiracy theories. You want to get together, listen to some conspiracy theories and talk about it, fine. But I want to distinguish between a theory with unproven claims or absolutely fraudulent claims, listening to it, kicking them around in a conversation for a little bit of entertainment. That's one thing versus bringing them into my way of thinking and then start embracing ideas that are fraudulent or wrong or you're based off fraudulent information. And it's another thing then to bring it into the church and then somehow adopt that thinking into the Christian worldview. That's when it gets really problematic for the church. And again, I'm all for conspiracy theories being, I'm not for censoring them. I'm not for silencing them. I want people to have the freedom to speak, but then people have to be educated enough to go, there's the claim. We need to take this apart. And I could go into an hour of discussing conspiratorial thinking, how it's circular reasoning, how once you get into it, you can never get out of it because you're given the conspiracy, then you're shown some anomalies that don't really make sense to some things that people can't answer. And then based off those anomalies, you go ahead and adopt and believe in the conspiracy theory. And then once anyone gives you any information that calls into question the conspiracy thinking, then you say that information comes from the conspiracy itself. Therefore, you can never be proven wrong. And therefore, you're trapped on a wheel that you cannot get off of. It's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. And we need to do better in training people not to fall into that way of thinking, but they do. They do, and once they do, it's problematic. So we're going to take a step back and try to figure out what QAnon is. What is it? What do we need to know about it? And then you need to determine, is it already present in your church? It may already be present in your thinking. It may already be present in your home. And then we have to go, wait a minute, what could this do to Christianity? Again, I'm not saying this is all going to become something major. It's just something we need to be aware of. So are you ready to put on your thinking caps? QAnon. What is it? What do they believe? And could this become the next big American religion? Could this become a thriving religious, quote-unquote, community? Could we see QAnon home congregations popping up all over the place? How will this influence Christianity at large? These are questions that I don't have answers to, but we're going to start the exploration with this. So sit back. You may have to turn up the volume. Let's listen carefully.
Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from Ann Olnick, Joan Gans Cooney, Lawrence B. Benenson, the Engelson Family Foundation, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, and from the corporate community, Mutual of America.
I'm Alexander Hefner, your host on The Open Mind. Based in San Diego, California, Travis View is my guest today. He's a writer, conspiracy theory researcher, and co-host of the podcast QAnon Anonymous, which chops and screws the best conspiracy theories of the post-truth era. According to Wikipedia, QAnon is a far-right conspiracy theory detailing a supposed secret plot by an alleged deep state against U.S. President Donald Trump and his supporters. The theory began with an October 2017 post on the anonymous image board 4chan by someone using the name Q, a presumably American individual that may have later grown to include multiple people, claiming to have access to classified information involving the Trump administration and its opponents in the United States. And that, again, is from Wikipedia. Welcome, Travis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, let's stop right there. So this all started with someone using the name Q, posting information on kind of a discussion forum. All right, 4chan is the channel, the discussion forum. I think it's now moved on to 4chan turned into 8-something. I don't know, 8chan. I don't know, something else. I think it turned into something else. These were discussion boards that wanted more freedom, didn't want to be censored, didn't want to be banned. And so you get a lot of stuff on these discussion boards that, man, crazy stuff, things that would probably be banned anywhere else. Now, there's good and bad in that. The good is you get the free expression of ideas. The bad is sometimes these things become places for child pornography to be distributed and all kinds of other crazy things. So there's good and bad in it. But so this starts as a conspiracy theory that there's basically some kind of secret cabal at work to take down Trump and his supporters. Now, some may go, well, wait a minute. There are some things that doesn't make sense. And I think there was this deep state working. Okay, remember, sometimes you can have some level of truth, and then that a conspiracy theory bases itself on, but then it goes further than the truth will take you. It will go further than the evidence will take you. You'll have something that'll be like, okay, wait, like, for example, well, I could go all kinds of examples, but you can have something there is some truth there, but they go further than that. But the issue for me is not whether there is a secret cabal at work to try to bring down Trump and his supporters. My concern is, how does it end up in the church? How does it become a religion? I'm focusing on a theological perspective, okay? And again, Christians need to be focused on what we're called to do, which is the Great Commission. So it's interesting. Now, they mentioned, hang on, let me see if I can find the podcast they mentioned. Give me a second. Let's look here. I know, live on the air, doing something at the last minute, but that's okay. One second. A podcast. Yes, hang on. QAnon Anonymous podcast. You can find QAnon Anonymous. All right, yes. QAnon Anonymous. That's the name of the podcast. So the person that's getting ready to speak is a part of this podcast. It's QAnon, QAnon Anonymous, QAnon Anonymous. About this show, the QAnon Anonymous podcast chops and screws the best conspiracy theories of the post-truth era. Please note, post-truth era. We live in an era now where we're past the truth. Truth doesn't even really exist anymore. Your host, Jake Julian and Travis Dredge, and the host, Jake, Julian, and Travis, 3 different individuals. Jake, Julian, and Travis dredge up wild beliefs from online fever swamps, engage QAnon followers in irregular warfare, and trip over deranged historical facts that some conspiracy theories sound sane. That make a conspiracy theory sound sane, all right? So again, QAnon Anonymous. You may want to look up this podcast. You may want to start listening to it. It looks like the latest episode is episode 92. So they've had 92 episodes so far. You may want to start working your way through them, see what it's all about. But this individual comes from that podcast, all right? And he's supposedly been researching conspiracy theories. That's where he spends his time. Trafficking in the world of conspiracy theories. And just know, QAnon starts as a conspiracy theory. It's posted on 4chan by someone who supposedly is getting classified information by the name of Q, and they think that Q turned into a number of individuals. So there's some of the basic information. Again, what we're looking for is, how does it end up a religion? How does it end up, like what? And so now Q drops, please note, I think you get an idea what a Q drop is now, right? Q drop is when Q drops some information, drops a post. So now we're going to interpret the Bible in light of Q drops and interpret Q drops in light of, so we're going to interpret the Bible in light of Q drops and interpret Q drops in light of the Bible. This is where things get really weird. How does Christians get involved in this kind of stuff? Like what is going on? So here we go. Let's continue to listen.
For having me.
Is that an accurate anecdotal origin story?
I mean, broadly, I think that really more central to the QAnon conspiracy theory is the belief that the world is run by a cabal of child-sacrificing elites. And they control everything. They control governments, they control the media, they control Hollywood. And they would have continued doing this sort of basically indefinitely were it not for the election of Donald Trump. They basically believe that if Hillary Clinton were to win, then this evil elite cabal would have just sort of continued doing all the evil they wanted, sort of unimpeded.
And please note, so basically these child-sacrificing lunatics, this cabal who control the world, they were about basically set to take over. Now this is very basic daily stuff. If you listen to Alex Jones, right? Whether he mentions the term QAnon, this is his. This has been the story. These child-sacrificing pedophiles, Satanists, there are a cabal of them who control everything, and we've got to fight back. And for this narrative, this QAnon conspiracy narrative works. Guess who the hero of the story is? Donald Trump has been sent to fight the cabal. Donald Trump has been sent by God to stop these child-sacrificing pedophiles. He's the hero in the narrative. And how we fight them is through political means. We battle them politically. Now, I know you just got to keep this all straight. So this is very, like, if you've listened to Alex Jones and you keep up with a lot of conspiracy theories, this QAnon thing is like, this is very common, and it's been around for a long time. Q and getting these drops, these Q drops, that took on, that started, I think they said 2017 is when the first drop occurred on 4chan. So that's when it kind of, I think the idea was already present in many, if you listen to Alex Jones, who've watched any of the films he made, this kind of idea was already present. The elites, the cabal, this group of individuals, this has already been out there. It just kind of taken a new form with Q and Q drops, QAnon, and now possibly turning into a religion. That's some new parts. But if you remember correctly, way back, a long time ago, I was on the air on the News and Focus program saying, hey, Alex Jones, Christians need to be paying attention to this because Alex Jones was constantly saying, hey, take my movie and watch it in your small group or in your Sunday school. He was literally promoting his material to be brought into churches. And I'm like, how in the world could he even think that a church would allow this in? But there were Christians who thought Alex Jones was, a prophet from God almost. Again, how does this get into the Christian world? I do not know. But it's just amazing what what ideas they will support, what things are on social media. Someone making some absolutely absurd statement that goes against basic Christian doctrine and basic Christian ideas, and they're sitting there hitting the like button. You're like, wait, you go to my church. How can you be liking that on social media? That is not biblical thinking. That is political thinking. That is conspiratorial thinking. You're a Christian. You are about truth. But it happens. It happens over and over and over again. And so here we go. Let's continue.
The QAnon community believes that Donald Trump knows all about this cabal and is fighting them behind the scenes. And he's doing it with the assistance of a group of military intelligence officials known as Q Team. And this Q Team is sort of letting the public know about what is going on with this sort of fight with the cabal through these posts on these image boards. Image boards originally started on 4chan, moved to 8chan, and now 8kun. And the QAnon community believes that by decoding these very cryptic, very vague sort of posts on these image boards, they can sort of understand what's sort of going on really behind the scenes.
The fact of the matter is Donald Trump has retweeted and often promotes QAnon literature. So even if you don't believe it as a viewer, it is in the mainstream right now by virtue of his reposting of it.
Yeah, I think, Trump has quote tweeted or retweeted literally dozens of QAnon accounts. He's actually even retweeted one tweet that contained the hashtag QAnon. Also, additionally, there are dozens of congressional candidates who currently promote QAnon. There's no knowing how well they're going to do in the election in November. But I think, this is definitely a topic worth exploring, even if you rightly dismiss it as all sort of absurd nonsense.
I want you to hear that. We have the President of the United States of America retweeting QAnon conspiratorial stuff. We got congressional leaders. This conspiratorial idea has gone all the way to the top. All right? And so it's gone to the top, and you've got many Christians who almost treat President Trump as if he's, the spiritual savior who's come to save all of us, and want to fight, we don't want to fight we don't want to fight using spiritual weapons. We don't want to fight the world the biblical way. No, we want to fight with flesh and blood and with political leaders and do so. But please note, the key is you can know what's going on. You can know what's going on behind the scenes if you can interpret the QAnon drops, the QAnon post. You cannot. Now, I want you to understand this. This literally appeals to the idea of secret knowledge. There's always some group that comes up within Christianity who loves, we've got the secret knowledge. We know what's going on. We've got it figured out. We can interpret what's going on. And Christians love to have this like, hey, we've got the upper hand because we have the inside knowledge. We've got special knowledge. We've got secret knowledge. This goes all the way back to Gnosticism. We have some knowledge that you do not possess. We have secret knowledge. And if you can get our knowledge, Christians love that kind of thing because it makes us feel superior to those poor, dumb, lost souls in the world who don't have all of our so-called secret knowledge. And we have so much secret knowledge that, look at the state of Christianity. Instead of having secret knowledge, we need biblical knowledge. But Christians get caught up into all of this stuff. So we're not reading theology. We're not studying the Bible. No, we get caught up into this stuff. And plus, trust me, this kind of stuff may be a fun hobby. Oh, I wonder what the Q drop is today. I wonder what's going on. It may be a hobby, but when your hobby then comes into your Christianity and begins to infiltrate and influence your Christianity and infiltrate your thinking, that you're no longer thinking biblically, but you're thinking based off your hobby, that's where the problem begins. Okay, so, there's a lot going on here. Let's continue.
What do they say, the QAnon advocates and posters, in response to what is the mainstream media definition, which is that this is not just outlandish, but this is just fictional? The sort of the QAnon reaction, sort of the mainstream media sort of definition of QAnon, is that this is all sort of a controlled message, is that the mainstream media is sort of like scared of QAnon rising and uncovering the truth. Because ultimately, they see themselves as a competitor to the mainstream media. They think that, when the mainstream media goes out and reports on things that happen, then that's basically all lies, or it's in service of a particular narrative. And the QAnon community, they are working to destroy that false narrative. They imagine themselves to be very heroic in this way. And do you see it more as a monetized commercial aspiration or as a political party? Because in both cases you've described, and if you follow Travis on Twitter, you'll see he will point out every example around the country and even the world of Q literature. So
Right.
That might be a sign, a sticker, a bumper sticker on the back of a
Sure.
car. That might be people reading the Qs in Donald Trump's messages and trying to decode what it means.
I think it's mostly a political aspiration. I think that there are two sides. There are the grifters of the QAnon community. There are people who don't believe it but want to exploit people who do believe it for monetary gain. But there are people who are sincerely radicalized into this belief. They believe this sort of this grand conspiratorial narrative that the world is run by a group of evil people who lie about everything, and they are very nobly working to dispel those lies.
How much of that, the lie narrative, is racist, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, and how much of it is not?
Well, this all ties back to sort of the classic sort of New World Order conspiracy theories, which is the idea that the world is sort of being controlled by a cabal, and those always have at the very minimum an anti-Semitic subtext. Mm-hmm. But lots of QAnon followers, they aren't, I guess, racist or anti-Semitic in an overt way, but some of them certainly are.
So, from your interaction with this community, with which you have some regular conversation or dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Daily or weekly?
I interact with QAnon followers online, I think,
every day?
Daily. And then I've also met a few at rallies and stuff.
So there is a segment of genuine believers in this movement who you would say are disconnected from that subtext and from that larger political aspiration?
Yes, there are people who don't really see the sort of political aspiration. They sort of see themselves as what they call themselves digital soldiers, and they imagine
that sounds political.
It does sound political,
right?
Because they imagine that they are fighting this very noble fight to destroy the narrative that's controlling everyone.
What I'm trying to understand, Travis, is when did the cabal form? I mean, when did you start doubting the integrity of the American Republic and the experience here?
A lot of them believe that it started hundreds of years ago, and this ties back to conspiracy theories about the Illuminati and the Freemasons, mm-hmm. and those sorts of secret societies, kind of conspiracy theories. There are others who believe that it more ties to the American deep state, as its origins in the belief that JFK was assassinated by out of control intelligence agencies in the U.S. federal government, and they have been working to keep everything secret. I mean, the truth is that it's not really a coherent narrative. They all have different sort of factions, different ideas of who the cabal is and what their ultimate goals are. But they're all sort of united in the belief that everything is a lie, and therefore the order that needs to be destroyed.
But they themselves are sort of an anarchy or a sort of a libertarian attitude towards their narrative. They don't feel like they have to have a unified narrative on their origin, and they accept people in their sort of unified principle is a love for Donald Trump.
That's true. We often call QAnon as sort of a big tent conspiracy theory, in the
mm-hmm.
sense that it welcomes people of many broad sort of conspiratorial beliefs. You might have people who believe in the idea of alien disclosure. This is the idea that the U.S. government has been hiding lots of UFO secrets for decades, and then eventually those secrets are going to be released and we'll have access to incredible technologies. There are other people who really are more focused on the religious aspects, the belief that the cabal is Satan worshipping and they're fighting a holy fight. And there are still others who believe things like JFK Jr. lives. This idea that JFK Jr. did not die in 1999 in a plane crash, but is somehow still alive to this day.
So there are people who have their own faith in Q, and it might be a certain connection to Kennedy, or it might be a connection to a hate movement, or it may be but there is a patchwork of what is inspiring these folks, and ultimately, what is the effect of Q on civil society?
I mean, the effect of Q on civil society, I think, is really corrosive. It's corrosive, number one, in that it erodes this idea of that truth is knowable, that you can sort of like trust anything at all, and the idea that you can sort of just form ideas about what's true inside of your own head, and that's as good as real. It's also destructive in what it does to personal relationships, at least what I've seen. A lot of QAnon followers, they talk about being isolated from their families. I mean, I personally get DMs from people about once or twice a month, and they'll say, my father, my brother, my friend has fallen into QAnon, and it's become an obsession, and it's becoming harder to maybe treat their mental illness, and do you have any recommendations on how do I deal with this issue? And it is very troubling.
What would you approximate is the size of the digital footprint, and is that analogous to the actual footprint? In other words, are we, by virtue of this episode and hosting you, overexposed to it, and in fact the digital footprint is much smaller than the actual presence? Your anecdotal evidence in tweeting every day seems to suggest Q literature is popping up around the country. So my question to you is what's the digital footprint, and does that have some basis in numbers in flesh and blood?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the digital footprint is sort of overrepresented because it is sort of an online movement. It's based upon this belief that the QAnon followers can, by sitting at their computer and tweeting this basically propaganda, they can change the world. It's a very sort of heroic narrative. But it does spill out into the real world in terms of affecting personal relationships, and also acts of domestic extremism. So it also obviously is part of the real world in that at many Trump rallies you'll see QAnon followers very proudly showing off their Q gear, and there'll be groups of QAnon followers who wear Q shirts. So the actual size of the QAnon community, I mean, is not really known that well. There hasn't been really a good, solid poll on that. I would love it if there was, but we just don't know that.
But you would be the most informed, both in terms of telling us how many actual human being followers there are online.
Yeah. I mean, I would
not bots.
There are lots. I mean, it would have to be at least in the hundreds of thousands and possibly into the millions.
And to what extent did the Russian disinformation efforts during the 2016 campaign amplify the sort of pre-Q ideas, and to what extent, if any, was that integrated into the founding principles of Q?
All right, a lot of information there. I'm trying not to interrupt too much. I just want you to realize that they're talking about this digital soldiers. This is a digital movement. But I want to make sure you understand that even though he's not mentioning it, I've got the news article right here in front of me published today, so I can take this conversation that happened a while back and advance it. Now you've got the leaders in these digital QAnon churches telling them to go form home congregations that are QAnon to spread the movement. That means it will leave the digital world and enter into, quote unquote, the physical world where you're having people meet. In other words, these people are going to be, if they're members of other churches, they will either stay there and the QAnon congregation will meet on a different night, a different day. But guess what? If they stay in their congregations, that means they're bringing their ideas into the congregation and will be recruiting people from the congregation into these other QAnon home congregations, or these people are going to leave their churches and then go form these home congregations. I don't know how it's going to play out, but the religious part of this is, look, if you possibly have people in the millions buying into this whole thing and believing it and spreading it, and it's destroying, relationships. Even if that is accurate, then there's plenty here to pay attention to. But now that it's crossing over to the religious aspect, and you have QAnon churches and going to possibly start QAnon home congregations, I am telling you, this is something we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, we know that the Russian state actors sort of worked to sort of amplify QAnon accounts. They worked to get a lot of retweets, a lot more followers into the QAnon. The Russians might have seen it as an opportunity. I don't think there's any evidence the Russians were driving the narrative so much. By all appearances, this is a homegrown movement.
Do these folks who are writing the stories of QAnon, are they engrossed because they're like writing their own National Enquirer? I mean, is that part of the allure of this, or is that a mistake to simplify it that way?
No, I think the people who genuinely sort of promote QAnon they really think that they're doing something noble and good. It's not something gossipy. It's really, they believe they're taking part in a incredible revolution. They believe that, like, after this revolution that they call the Great Awakening,
Right.
there will be this incredible time of peace and prosperity and togetherness, a utopia, basically. So they feel very motivated to keep doing what they're doing online.
And meanwhile, they've made a lot of predictions that haven't materialized.
They predicted that people like Huma Abedin would be indicted. I mean, the very first Q drop
Have any of their predictions been realized?
Not really. I mean, not more so than like a sort of a psychic medium might be able to get right. I mean, the thing is that Q relies on these sort of these cold reading tricks. Well, Q will say something like very vague, like "watch the water." Now, watch the water. What does that mean? I mean, it could mean anything. And but the thing is that because water covers most of the planet, we all need water to survive. There's going to be a news event eventually that involves Trump and water. And so the QAnon community will look at that and will say, look, Trump drank a glass of water on camera. Q said, watch the water. That means that Q predicted that event, which, of course, is nonsense.
Right. And do you think, judging by your interactions with this community, that they will find a way to entrench themselves in any narrative where there is destruction and basically say that they predicted it, in some fashion, because they've come up with so many,
of course,
hypotheses, for instance, with coronavirus and the emergence of this new disease? How have you seen the real-time integration of live world events into their propaganda?
Yeah. They a lot of them have been claiming that the coronavirus is sort of a created by the deep state, or they claim that it's a part of Bill Gates' plan to sort of destroy most of humanity.
Or China, right? I think I've seen some examples because
China,
that's where there is a segment that is the American ethos of fear of other powers and some sympathy that you might have in understanding the geopolitical conflict historically, the aspiration of democracy. But are those people who would accuse China of corruption or some sort of biochemical failure, intentional or unintentional? Is there a segment of them that they're saying that because of their own professed patriotism?
It might, yeah, it's part of that. I feel like they're mostly wary of elites generally, just the people who are in power, whether it's Bill Gates, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party.
So why do they want Donald Trump seemingly to serve until he's, how old, over 100? I mean,
right.
Some, maybe a preponderance of the Q community would like to see Trump's realization of that Time magazine meme graphic where he's winning elections every 4 years for 3-4 decades. I mean, aren't they so skeptical of authoritarianism?
Well,
except Trump?
Not his case. They see him as a Washington outsider, which he technically is, but they believe that he is one of the only uncorrupted elites. For some reason, they believe that he is the one who's going to come in and acquire all of this power, and he's going to basically tear down the power structures that this evil cabal has built up.
Do you think behind closed doors, before Twitter, there was this kind of fanfare for Reagan? I mean, there has to have been some cultivated political allegiance in the past on which these folks have built. There's lots of people who venerate Reagan as a great patriot, great American, great president. But this is certainly another level. I mean, people in the QAnon community revere Trump to almost on a spiritual level. They believe that he is, basically he has saved the country from certain destruction. They believe that actually if Hillary Clinton was elected president, it would be the end of the republic. And the only reason that didn't happen was because Trump, against all odds, won the office. Do you have any concern that the work that you're doing, and now the work that I'm doing here, interviewing you, is heightening people's attention or interest in a way that's ultimately counterproductive?
Yeah, I'm always worried about that, but at the same time, I feel like we're living in an age where conspiracy theories are normalized more so than ever. They are sort of promoted at the highest levels of power, when it wasn't that long ago when conspiracy theories were the sort of the pastime of the powerless. But I think that it's important. It's important to talk about conspiracy theories for that reason, but also because we're seeing, some conspiracy theory-driven extremism, and once people's lives are at risk, I think is certainly important and worth addressing.
And how would you assess the rehabilitation, the DMs that you get on Twitter from folks who say they are now forever lost to this cult? And has there been any successful intervention or rehabilitation?
There is a cult expert named Steve Hassan who deals with these issues, who's been exploring QAnon quite recently. He's helped people get out of other cults like Scientology, and he has just started exploring it. I don't know of a really good case study of someone who was like deeply into QAnon who eventually got out. I have spoken to a few people who were into QAnon for the very first few months, for 3 or 4 months. They realized it was nonsense, they got out. But it is a lot harder for someone who was involved for years to eventually realize that they've been bamboozled and then stop believing.
Right. And from your interactions, you gather that there are some examples of you wouldn't expect it, but your neighbor could be among the Q following. There's no precise pedigree, although there seems to be a pretty tribal following that I was going to ask you if you could estimate what % of these people did come from the evangelical community.
There's a lot of QAnon followers. They are perfectly pleasant people. I mean, for example, I went to a QAnon rally in Tampa, Florida, which was attended by about 120, 150 people or so, and they knew who I was. They knew what I reported on, but they were perfectly nice to me, despite that. A lot of them do come from the evangelical community because the narratives are so similar, in the belief that they believe in this idea of the rapture, the idea that there is going to be a great reckoning that is coming, in which all the evil people will finally suffer their ultimate fate.
Why is it that the conspiracy theory that ends up having a foundation in fact, or why is it that religion are no longer sufficient outlets? You see shows like the HBO series on the McDonald's million monopoly scandal. You see examples where there is some evidentiary basis to find alternative viewpoints in media. And then, of course, there's God. I mean, then there's the question of religion and faith and whether it's real or not. I mean, isn't there enough to keep us questioning that we don't need to focus on Q? I mean, or that they don't need to be focusing on making up other questions? I mean...
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, like on our podcast, we often explore the real, incredible, wild stories of powerful people conspiring. That's something that happens naturally. That's history, in fact. But there's this. I feel like there's a profound sense of sort of unreality because of the fragmentation of media. People feel disoriented. People don't know what's true anymore. People don't know who to trust. People feel let down by institutions. And so they resort to these sorts of wild fantasies in order to explain that sense of unreality.
In those shows, like the HBO McDonald's docuseries or the Netflix Making a Murderer, there are real people conspiring, and it's not the elite. I mean, it's someone who works for a security firm, and someone who is in a police department, and there are ample examples, and are they not resonating because these people have dispelled HBO Netflix, they're part of the cabal. Is that a reason that they wouldn't undertake this kind of entertainment or this kind of engagement?
Yes, they have a knee-jerk rejection of anything that they believe is coming from the mainstream media. Anything that they believe is coming from an institutional source of information, it's automatically suspect for them.
Where do you draw that line of institutional? I mean, there has to be some gray area for QAnon people, because if they're not watching local news at all, they're not seeing anything about recalls and toys. I mean, how much have they given up on normal or civil society?
I mean, they have taken to sort of trusting sort of YouTubers with maybe 200,000 followers, where they think that that's sort of more authoritative, or at least more trustworthy source.
You'd say that the majority, if not all, of the QAnon followers would reject local news, meaning they don't watch local news anymore and only watch YouTube?
I think they tend to trust local news more so than national news or maybe cable news, but they trust sort of what they call citizen journalists, which is basically anonymous people online who spin their theories and connect dots, and sort of they think that this is sort of uncovering the true source of information rather than sort of traditional journalists.
And do you get any sense of when that started for most of these QAnon people? Had they been broken from society in this way and for many years or decades prior to this?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to one person who was a QAnon follower who claims that he believed in the sort of sense of like the deep state and the cabal ever since the Kennedy assassination. So it was decades in the making. I mean, QAnon just sort of provides a sort of convenient narrative for everyone. And also the other elements, obviously, the rise of social media. Because if you were a conspiracy theorist decades ago, it was a lot of work to get alternative sources of information or spin alternative theories. It took research. You had to go to the library. It was labor intensive. Nowadays, you can connect a lot of dots and spin a wild story at your computer, in under an hour.
And reach and potentially persuade
millions of people. Yeah, if you had a conspiracy theory decades ago, you could maybe staple together a couple pages and try to send them out to whoever was interested in it. But yeah, it wouldn't have much reach, and most people wouldn't trust it.
Finally, how can people access your podcast, and are the vast majority of listeners part of the community or part of the community that's just interested in the Q community?
Yeah, my podcast is QAnon Anonymous. You can find that on any podcasting platform. And we're mostly sort of QAnon skeptics. They're mostly people who are sort of interested in the wild stories, or even maybe think that maybe there's something to them. We also have a lot of listeners who have family members who fell into QAnon. They want to sort of understand what these people believe and why they think they do a lot.
Has Oliver Stone called you yet?
Not yet. Waiting on that call.
He will. Yeah. He will. Thank you, Travis, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to you in the audience. I hope you join us again.
There you have it. A lot of information. I did not break in too much because I wanted you to hear that. I would definitely tell you to go look up his podcast. I'm going to post a lot of information on the theologycentral.net blog, theologycentral.net. theologycentral.net, theologycentral.net. Look at the blog section. I'll try to give you the name of his podcast. I can't really give you a link to a podcast app because I don't know which one you're going to be using, but it's available. I'll give you the name and some basic information, and I'm going to post the article in its entirety on Is QAnon the Newest American Religion? I'll get that posted as well so that you have all this information. But I'll end with this because I think this is very important, all right? Let's see here. Where do we want to go here? QAnon builds an apocalyptic thinking common in parts of evangelical and fundamentalist Christianity in America. Q drops frequently include Bible passages and the style of study of Scripture and Q text employed. The careful search for hidden prophetic meaning and correspondence to history and current events is very much a creature of the religious right and an heir apparent of Left Behind and the late great planet Earth. Late Great Planet Earth. I think it was Hal Lindsey who wrote that. And then, of course, the Left Behind series. So in other words, the Q drops and the way it deals with Scripture is very similar to the Late Great Planet Earth and Left Behind, and that kind of prophetic way of thinking that is very prevalent within evangelical and fundamentalist Christianity. And so the Q drops appeal to Christians. And then you add the religious dimension, well, then you get basically QAnon churches. You get them wanting to do home congregations to spread it. And then this idea of thinking comes into the church, shows up in small groups. Pastor doesn't even know what's going on. And the next thing you know, you've got this QAnon conspiratorial way of thinking just sweeping through the church. And trust me, there is nothing more frustrating as a pastor is to hear your people talk and go, wait, where did you get that information? And it's like, hey, I can't believe any information other than the information I believe. Okay, the information I believe is right. It can deal with vaccines, it can deal with medicine, it can deal with supplements, it can deal with you name it. But their information is right. All the other information is wrong. And so they'll say something and you'll go home and look it up and go, where did they get it? That information is completely fraudulent. You can do a Google search sometimes and you want to call the people in your church and go, okay, don't know where you got that information, but that is so wrong. It's not even funny. And it's like, how did you get there? As Christians, we are about truth. Research, and don't just research the side that already agrees with you. In other words, if you're anti-vaccine and all you're going to read is anti-vaccine material, well, then you're going to always think you're right. You got to read all the medical studies and the history of vaccines wiping this out and that out and that out. Look, no. Can't trust any of that. Well, then that's not Christianity. That's not Christian thinking. That's not Christian thinking. Christian thinking wants truth. We want truth. We look for truth. And I think there's a mentality within I think sometimes why conspiratorial thinking is so prevalent within Christianity is because Christianity starts with this idea. We're Christians. The world isn't, so we can't trust the world. We can't trust the world. And once you already kind of have that mindset, then guess what comes with it? Okay, now you take any topic and then you're like, well, I can't trust I can't trust the mainstream world. I can't trust medical journals. I can't trust doctors. I can't trust medical professionals. I can't trust medical organizations. I can't trust the news on this, and this. Well, then where do they start looking? They start looking for these small little communities those small little communities may even throw in a scripture here or there. And the next thing you know, they're buying into it hook, line, and sinker. And it's like and then that becomes their mission. Their mission becomes more. Listen, you'll find this within Christians. Some Christians, their mission is, let's say alternative health more than it is presenting the gospel to people. More than being a Christian and presenting, they become preoccupied. Like, this is my mission. Q is my mission, or whatever the mission is. And it's like the Christians don't realize you're allowing your Christianity to be hijacked and your purpose as a Christian to be absolutely overcome with your hobby and with your new agenda. And then you want to mix it with your Christianity. Christianity is supposed to be your agenda. Glorifying God, spreading the gospel. That is supposed to be what your life is about. But this QAnon thing, You now know what it is. You now have a lot of information. You've got some resources. Let me give you the name of their podcast because I would strongly challenge you to go at least look into it. And when I promote a podcast, I'm not saying that this is obviously the podcast I'm promoting. It's not a Christian one. May have all kinds of adult language and all kinds of other things. I'm promoting it because they're the ones who looking into the whole QAnon phenomenon. And so you can be familiar with it. But it's called QAnon Anonymous. QA, capital QA, lowercase NON, QAnon Anonymous, all right? And 92 episodes so far. The last episode was 2 days ago. It's 67 minutes long. Hey, so other people go long too. And what I'm going to do is I'll post some information about this podcast and challenge you to go look at it. I'm going to post all of that article about QAnon. I'm going to give you the name of the article I'm going to post. See, where is it? I got too many pages opened up here. Where is it? basically, is QAnon going to become the next American religion? I think is what it's called. So, yeah, I've got here it is. There it is. Is QAnon the newest American religion? And I'll get that posted as well. So there you have it. I wanted to at least take some time today. I know it took a lot more time than I wanted, but I wanted to bring all that information out so that you kind of know what's going on and something to be looking forward to how you need to be looking out for it. And not looking forward like, hey, I can't wait till it gets here. But you need to be looking to see if this is something that's coming, how it could be infiltrating Christianity. It could already be infiltrating your thinking. I just plead with you. Listen. I just cannot state this enough. Once you get into the conspiratorial thinking, once you get into it, look, some of these conspiracies are, like there's not enough evidence to disprove it and there's not enough evidence to prove it. So do you want to spend all your time chasing that and fighting about that and arguing about that? It's almost like I think some Christians, they're no longer satisfied with the Word of God. They're no longer satisfied with Christ and the Word of God. They want to get caught up in all of these other things. It's like we need to get back to the Bible. We need to get back to doing what we're called to do as Christians. All of these things are just hijacking Christianity. They're going to keep hijacking Christianity into biblical Christianity. It's going to be a thing of the past as far as any large numbers is concerned. And I mean, we've got a lot of things happening to the church, and this kind of thing is just something else to be looking out for. And again, who does it appeal to? You even heard it in what we played. It appeals to evangelical Christians. How does this stuff appeal to evangelical Christians? They couldn't even understand why it appeals. They had some idea of why it appeals, but they're like, what? Why would they get, like, I think even the host, like, why would they get caught up in this? Why would they? Don't they have enough other things to focus on? God, the Bible. But no, they get caught up. I'm going to argue because many Christians are they become discontent with God, discontent with their salvation, discontent with the Bible and theology and church history. They're looking for something else. And every time Israel became discontent with God, it led to idolatry. Discontentment breeds idolatry. Discontentment produces idolatry. We end up turning to something other than God. Now, we still want to connect it with God. We still want to somehow connect it with our Christianity, but we're pursuing a new religion called QAnon. Yeah, that's a dangerous situation. All right. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Thank you for listening. God bless.